Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 307 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is moving forward. Our quote of the day comes to us from Robert Frost. In 3 words, I can sum up everything I've learned about life. It goes on. Before we jump into today's episode, if you have not grabbed yourself a copy of our new book, The Positivity Tribe, please head on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever else books are sold to join our tribe and help us spread some positivity. I've known our guest now for the past 8 months, and I'm honored to have Seth Gibree join us today. He shares some really interesting life lessons with us, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. Seth, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So the first question we ask everybody is the same question I'm going to ask you is, are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
Of course. I hope we can make a difference in somebody's life at some point today. That'd be good.
That would be good, especially during these challenging times in 2020. So as you know, the number and objective of our show is to both motivate and inspire listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you yourself have either a no-quit story or perhaps a challenging personal or professional time where you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
Wow, that's there's so many actually that come to mind when I think of no quit stories, especially within our family. We've had some challenging times within our family, especially over the last, call it 7 or 8 years. I know most people have great relationships. Most people don't have good relationships with their parents, but I have a very close relationship with my father. He's my best friend. He was best man in my wedding. And back in 2013, he ended up getting hit by a tree he was cutting down. And during the process of getting hit by this tree, he ended up, it was crazy. Like if we think back to the time, I think there were a number of circumstances that played out for my dad to live through a traumatic episode. I remember he used to, my sister and her husband, my husband was in commercial real estate during the economic downturn in 2008, 2009. And so they had to actually move into a house that my dad built. And then my parents moved into the garage of their house and then ended up filling that out. So them and my 4 nephews were at the house with my parents. And at the time, my sister's like, I don't want to go live with my parents again as an adult with kids. And I remember also like my dad getting frustrated with my sister's dogs, that they would dig holes in his yard. He really liked to keep his yard up and maintained. And he was a fireman and paramedic growing up. So he had some medical experience, but he had gotten injured helping carry somebody out of a house when he was on the force years ago. And so he was cutting down a tree that had come, there had been a storm that had come through Atlanta and knocked a number of trees down. And the tree company was going to come out on a Thursday to clean up the trees. And so it was Tuesday, and he couldn't wait for them to come out. And he decided he wanted to take some of the trees that were leaning down because he didn't want my nephews to get hurt being outside in the yard. And there were 20 plus trees that had been blown over or knocked over. And so he's out there cutting a number of trees down, and he already cut 10 or so down. And my mom yelled at him to come in to eat some lunch. And he said, well, let me get this one more. And that one more, when he started cutting it down, it got hung up in another tree. And then he was straddling the base of it, and it kicked back through the force of it. It ended up kicking the tree back about 30 to 40 feet. It was about 100-foot pine. And when it did, it degloved his hand. So it took basically most of the skin off of his hand and crushed that. And then it also compound fractured his upper and lower legs out the back of his leg. And then it threw him back, and then he landed, and then the chainsaw landed, and then the tree landed on top of him. Well, what was funny is, well, not funny, but what's ironic is he landed in one of those holes the dog had been digging. And that area that he landed in, just as a matter of fact, gave the opportunity for my sister and brother-in-law who were at the house. My brother-in-law was doing some work, was supposed to go on a scout weekend with his son, or a trip with his son, and was like, oh, let me knock out these 4 more emails. And he was supposed to leave and just ended up catching up on some more work, and literally shut his computer down and heard my dad yell for help. And he went out there and him and my sister pulled my dad out from under the tree. And my dad told him to elevate his leg and get tourniquets. And so they put tourniquets on his leg and his arm. And he ended up, long story short, they rushed him to the hospital. And, I think God is very purposeful in how he moves in life. And we have to remember and to try to have a sense of gratitude, but always keep moving forward. I think that's one of the things. A couple months prior, I had to take my dad to a doctor's visit because my mom, she had to go out of town with some friends. And so I knew his whole medical history. They rushed him to the ER, the local ER. That was a trauma center. And a friend of mine who I rode bikes with happened to be the ER doc that day that was there. So I got to the ER literally 2 minutes after my father got there, and was able to go into the trauma center where he was. And I do have a medical background, so that definitely helps too. And I was able to tell them what his medical history was and how things were going medically with him. And my dad looked at me and told me that he was dying. And I could see it in his eyes. I've seen him before. And you kind of never forget if you're with somebody when they pass away. And my dad told me he was dying. And I said, you're not dying. And I knew what he needed to hear. I said, your leg, your hand, and your leg and your hand are really screwed up, but they can fix that. I said, your head, your back, and your neck are all good. And he said, okay. And then long story short, he was in surgery for a long time. He ended up losing his leg, losing his hand. His leg is mid-thigh. He lost it. His hand is just above his wrist on the left side. And, throughout the whole ordeal, he always had a mindset of, I'm going to get better. I'm going to take steps forward. This is my new normal. And so he was embracing what he felt a sovereign God had as purpose for his life. And so he's never quit. And even as he's going through challenges now, he was just diagnosed with lung cancer, and he has surgery coming up in a week or so for that. Actually Monday. So a week from today, from where we're recording, he's having the upper right lobe of his lung taken away. And he just thinks of it as his next. And so I think not quitting, that's one thing that really comes to mind and helps me keep perspective on things that are important. And so for me, faith and family are very, very important. And I have so many stories. My mother-in-law passed away 2 years ago from bone cancer. And thinking back to that, she never quit. She always fought. And it was so hard to watch somebody go through that, but also to see the good moments and I hate to say the perspective that you get in the tough moments, but I think if you can look at things with a positive mindset, you can somewhat understand how to get day to day and realize that everybody's got a story of something they're going through. And I know probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do as a husband was to tell my wife that her mom had cancer, because I was the one that had to tell her that. And then to be able to watch how her mom approached her battle with such faith and such strength was hard to see, but also was so inspiring. And she fought it for 3 years and ended up having her jaw removed. That's where it had come from. And then had a good year or so. And then, actually she had a good 2 years after she had healed, or almost 2 years, and was able to travel and spend time with her husband. And then unfortunately it came back with a vengeance, but she never quit. And I think, I don't know, those are the two stories that really, really come to mind for my family when it comes to never quit moments.
I appreciate you sharing that backstory, and I've known you for quite some time now. And I think or a couple of things you said stood out, but one of the things that really hit me is everybody has a story. And that's one of the main reasons why we do this show and why I love asking that quote unquote no quit story. And the way you answered it, although you laughed as you said it, is, I have many stories. That's part of life is we all have stories. And that's one of the things we try to take out from this show, is to inspire and motivate people during these difficult times, and not just during 2020. It was before 2020, and it'll be hopefully moving forward. But the thing that stood out to me, which you said about your father, is his next, and he's got lung cancer now, he's having surgery, and it's his next. And I think that's the way that we're supposed to go through life. I think in this day and age with entitlement and everybody, gets a trophy, I think that takes away from some of the character of our country, which is, we're here in the United States of America because so many people left other places for opportunity, for something that they thought would be better for themselves, their family, their kids, fill in the blank. But it's, how do you strive and how do you keep going during these difficult times? And in no way, shape, or form am I going to say, I know exactly what you're going through and I have it worse, or this person has it worse. But that's not the perspective of the show. It's what happens during those challenging times, and do you come back better, stronger? Do you learn from it? So I just have to say, I really appreciate you touching on that. Need to ask you, if you don't mind, really quickly, just to tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So a little bit about me is I grew up playing a whole lot of sports, and so I'm originally from the Northeast, and so I love the Boston. I'm a Boston sports homer, so Patriots, Red Sox, Bruins, Celtics. That's kind of where I grew up and what I grew on. And then as life would have it, I decided to go to dental school, and ended up graduating as a dentist, and worked for other people for a couple of years, and then decided to open my own place. Then I decided to open a second location, and a number of years after that, our sons were 4 and 7, and decided that I needed to be home more. Like it was that moment of, there's a book called Essentialism that Greg McKeown talks about. If you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. And I felt like my life was being prioritized differently than what we wanted it to be. So in 2010, I sold my practices that I had, and went to work for a company that purchased them, and that I affiliated with, and I still work for them today. Today, I am a clinical director, a senior clinical director for a dental company. And what I would work on is artificial intelligence and machine learning within the dental industry, and then also help mentor other doctors that are supported by the organization. I did have a disability a number of years ago that I cut off the end of one of my fingers, and I was making a pot of chili, and it needed some lime, and I always put lime in my chili, and I was kind of in a rush because I forgot to put it in, and sliced through part of my finger. So that kind of messed up my dental career, unfortunately, which I really, really enjoyed and got a lot of passion for. But again, it's just about moving forward and kind of prioritizing where you should be. So that's kind of a short version about me. Husband of 22 years. I had to think for a second.
We won't tell your wife you had to think about that.
Yeah, 17-year-old and 14-year-old boys.
I think it's ironic how you throw that disability in there as far as just one of those, well, this happened. And having known you for a while, I think that's a pure reason why I wanted to have you on the show, is not only with what you shared prior to about your father and also your mother-in-law, but knowing within the last few months, getting a chance to know you, I think it's that moving forward. And I think you probably don't realize it in some ways, but you're very similar to your father. And, this is my next. And when most people want to go down the road of woe is me, I think you're one of those guys that, goes down and like, all right, it's here, or it's happened. And, I need to move forward. And I think it's just, important to have that mindset. And again, not just in 2020, but moving forward. A question we ask each guest is, if you had to define yourself, but you could only use one word, what word would you pick?
I've thought about that a good bit, and I really would say love. I think it's hard to pick one word. That's the challenge, I think. But I would say love would be the word that I would choose to pick.
So, as we've known each other for quite some time now, you know that books are an important part of my personal and professional life. So, I have to ask if you're reading anything currently right now, or perhaps you've read something recently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
So currently I'm actually reading John Gordon's The Garden. So I'm about halfway through that. Hopefully I'll finish it actually today or tomorrow. I would say for me, the two most important books in my life have been the Bible, which I have read cover to cover. I've read all of it, but not cover to cover. It's been a interesting way to do it. It's hard to read cover to cover, I think. But there's so much wisdom in the Bible, and the fact that so many authors over so many years put together so much truth. Whether you believe in Scripture or not, it is the principles that are in it are so grounded in how we should live lives of love and empathy and care for one another. And then truly the other book that really hit home for me, and maybe it was the time that I read it, was Essentialism. And that really, again, helped me prioritize my life and how to respectfully tell people no, that are trying to define your time. And it helped me to realize what my main priorities in life were too.
I appreciate you touching on those three books. And just to reiterate for a second on what you shared about the Bible, I think, unfortunately, in today's day and age, when you're either pro-religion or anti-religion, I think the Bible gets just some really different opinions, and people have, again, it's 0 or 100. I don't find a lot of people are kind of in the middle. But the thing that you said and the way you said it really stood out to me, because it's the principles that are in the Bible that I think most people miss. And obviously, I'm a big John Gordon fan, and I loved The Garden. And I think it's the principles that are super important, not only today, but moving forward, about how to go about being the best version. I think that's what most people miss about the Bible or the Quran or other books like that, is they think of them as, this is a, religious experience where you have to be in it 100%. I know a bunch of people that, quote from the Bible that are not even religious, but again, going back to what you said, it's those principles, the meaning of being kind, doing for others, love, hope, all those things that stand out. So I'm glad that you shared that. If you could go back and give the 20-year-old version of yourself just one piece of advice, what would that be?
It would be Scripture. In Matthew, Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And I think that would be it, is that, realize that everybody does have a story. Everybody is created specifically in the image of God. So being that everybody has purpose, everybody has everybody has the desire to be loved and the need to be loved. And I feel that a lot of times we're so quick to judge rather than to listen. And so I think our society is missing a whole lot of empathy, unfortunately, and the willingness to just sit and try to understand one another. So that would kind of be what I would tell my 20-year-old self today. And I mean, who knows? Tomorrow it might be a different lesson, but I think right where I am right now, that's what it would be.
Something that you said, I just want to touch on for a second. So quick to judge rather than to listen. And I think in today's day and age, people don't listen to learn. They listen, or the only reason they're listening is they're waiting for that person's mouth to stop, and then they just all of a sudden jump in. And I think people miss, and I know when I was younger, I definitely missed the whole concept of listening. I was thinking of it along the lines as, well, if I'm listening to Seth, then that means I'm agreeing with him and I'm changing my opinion. And it's actually completely the opposite. It's very similar to the word vulnerable. People look at vulnerability as a weakness. I think it's pure strength. And I think it's the same thing with listening. Is, as a country, especially during an election coming up, I think if we actually listened to understand the other person's perspective, I think we'd be at a way better place. And it doesn't mean in any way, shape, or form that you change your opinion or you have to believe what that person says as what you believe. It means, and it should be defined by, I'm going to listen to Seth explain why he thinks this. And at the end of that 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it is, I should be able to say, understand where he's coming from. It doesn't change what I think. It doesn't mean that Seth's right and I'm wrong. But I think both parties should be able to at least say, okay, I understand the other person's opinion or perspective. Maybe I still stand on my side of the fence, but at least I understand where they're coming from.
And I think that's so true, is we all are unique. We all, man, even if you come from a 2-parent household or a 1-parent household, or like whatever your story is, they're all unique. And I think we're so quick to put our perspective on somebody else when, they always said, you don't know how somebody else lives until you put yourself in their shoes. But I think even to a deeper degree, till we understand one another. And I think it helps to actually challenge your beliefs, to listen to somebody else who has a differing opinion. We're so tribal these days, and we want to just hang out with the people that we're like, or that believe like us or think like us. And I think that's a mistake, because then you're narrowing your focus. And you see it on social media all the time, is you follow this person like you follow this person like you. I would challenge people to follow people that aren't like you some too. So you get some of those differing views and you get some of those differing opinions. You might not agree with them, but you would hope that you get some sort of understanding of where they come from, especially if you come at it with an open mind. Now, social media, there's a whole lot of untruth out there, so I think it's hard to unwrap what's truth. But I think when we can sit and listen to somebody individually and what their story is, and hear their perspective on why they are that way and why they believe that way and how they grew up and what their family's like, or what their challenges have been and what their successes have been, that's all part of makes them who they are.
No, I could not agree more. So you mentioned social media. I'm going to go there now for a second. So during these challenging times, I wanted to ask you if there's anybody, 1 or 2 people that you follow on social media that just put out positive information or positive messages that maybe you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
I think you and Chris Wilberding and Jeff Forrester. I think all you guys are putting out positive content. A guy named Chad Wright, 3 of 7 Project. He's got a lot of positive stuff out there. John Gordon, there's the Power of Positivity. There's so many, like, in my mind, like, looking for positive things. I like animals, so I like watching dog videos and stuff. So I actually walked down this morning, and my son's eating breakfast for school, and he's on Instagram, and there's a puppy video there that, like, a 17-year-old watching a puppy video. You can't beat some happy dogs in the morning, and dogs do typically love us, no matter if we've had a good day, a bad day. They're non-judgmental, and so I love animals too. So anyways, those are the things that I follow.
It's a fun question, because obviously there are some of those people that we all know out there, but it's just neat to get people's perspectives. And I think you said something going back to before I asked that question, because I didn't want to forget the question, but it's something my parents said to me, especially my mom, is you talk about maybe you should follow some of those people that you have different opinions with. And my mom would suggest, maybe you should read some different books. And typically I read autobiography books or sports books or a lot of personal development books. She had said, maybe, you try reading, autobiography about somebody that you don't really enjoy per se, to understand where they're coming from, or read a fiction book. And I think it's something, when you think about it, it's the same thing that you just said. It's so powerful, and it doesn't mean, that you change your opinion of everything, but it means that you're willing to listen. And again, going back to what you said, it's been a common theme during this podcast, is I think we all do have a story, and most of us have multiple stories. And speaking of that, if I could give you the opportunity to have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would you pick?
Jesus. Does that count? Or do I have to move on past that one?
No, that definitely counts. The one thing I would say to you is if you were not able to have dinner with Jesus, who would be your second choice?
The one that comes to mind for me right now, and I think that's just outside of family, people within our family that have passed away. I think there are definitely some of those that I would love to spend time back with. But I think from a public figure, I would say Abraham Lincoln, because I think he had an incredibly unique story. He failed a lot, and I've always said that to fail is your first attempt in learning. That you continue to move forward, and you say, okay, this didn't work, even within my businesses when I had those, is how do I take this lesson of quote failure and learn from it and move forward from it. But I really think to see how many times he failed in his quest for political office, and then also his life hardships. He had so many of them that just the times, and it's such a difficult time. And I just think he would be an interesting one to sit down with.
So I have to share with you the follow-up to that question. The number 1 and number 2 suggested people for dinner would be Jesus and Abraham Lincoln. So you...
I don't feel unique then.
No, but you hit them both in the same, which is interesting. But going back to what you shared about Lincoln, he's actually one of my 2 people. So if I've been asked that question, and people who know me know that it would be Michael Jordan and Abraham Lincoln. And I have a plaque printed up in my other office that talks about Abraham Lincoln, and the last thing on the bottom is he was elected president of the United States, but every single one of them before is about his failures, about unfortunately some of the tragedies he had in his life with his son, and then I believe his first wife died. But when you go through his life, and not only that, but what he dealt with as the president of the United States of America, and the fact that he was assassinated, it's just, he's an amazing individual. And it's not the success for me that stands out. He was unbelievably successful, but it was the fact that he kept on going when nobody said, nobody thought that he could do that. So I'm glad that you touched on that. I'm curious to get some of your answers on this one, because we're now going to switch over to what we call our hot seat questions. And the only request is just spit out the first thing that comes to mind.
All right, come on.
Last meal, you can pick absolutely anything. What do you pick?
Man, pizza's hard to beat.
Favorite.
But I also like a good lamb chop too, and apple pie.
All right,
it's a unique mix.
So your last meal is pizza, lamb chop, and apple pie.
Sure, we'll go with that.
Favorite smell?
We'll stick with the apple theme. I like apples.
You can only pick one. Your all-time favorite sport?
So basketball.
Favorite team?
Celtics.
Do you have an all-time favorite movie?
Ooh, I'm gonna say Top Gun.
Ooh, okay. The most recent one's supposed to be coming out this year. We'll see if it does. Do you have an all-time favorite author?
I don't, actually. I try to diversify my reading list.
What is the favorite app you have on your phone?
Can I pass? I don't.
You can pass, 100%. What is the background picture on your phone?
My sons. Actually, yes. Both of my sons at a basketball game here in Atlanta.
And do you have an all-time favorite book?
The Bible is my all-time favorite.
And do you have an all-time favorite quote?
Oh, I think there's a number of good ones. I've touched on the one, if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. We volunteered a number of years at a ministry called Lighthouse Ministries. And what Lighthouse is about giving families whose kids are going through cancer a vacation. So basically, they go to the beach, all expenses paid, and then you're there to serve their families. Well, one of the kids one year that unfortunately has passed away, his name was Tater Singleton. And Tater told me one time, he said, "Don't be afraid, Seth, because God is always by your side." And that one really, really stuck with me. As this kid's going through cancer and has a positive outlook and is laughing and it's gone through chemo and so much crap, that's his outlook. So that's another one that stuck with me. There's so many great quotes. I think Mark Twain said, "If you tell the truth, then you don't have to remember anything else," something along that nature. And I think that's an important concept for me. And it helps in sleep if you're very honest and very straightforward. And then Bob Goff one time, these are I'm just rattling off quotes that really have stuck with me, but Bob Goff in, I think Love Does was the book. He said, "I used to be afraid at failing at something that really mattered to me, but now I'm more afraid of succeeding at things that don't matter." And I think when we succeed at things that don't matter, our priorities kind of get out of whack. And it kind of takes our time away from where we should be investing our time. So those are some that just jump out, and sorry to rattle off. Like you asked for one and I gave you, I think, 4 or 5.
See, you passed on the app question and you gave like 12 quotes. So that's good. You made up for it and then some. So last question I have for you is the same question I have for everybody to end each episode, is if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
I think the couple things is you're being prepared for something that you might not know about. And I think like even Abraham Lincoln, we were talking about him, is all his failure prepared him to handle a situation uniquely designed for him. And I think if we can keep the mindset of positivity and moving forward, even through difficult times, that a lot of times that it's always darkest before the dawn, so to speak. And I think a lot of times realizing that it is darkest before the dawn, and just to keep moving forward. And the other thing is my motto that I kind of live life by is love God, love others, and love yourself without an ego. In other words, like if we prioritize taking care of one another and loving one another, and also loving ourselves, because I think sometimes we are our own worst critics and worst enemies, and realizing that we're all, again, created with a specific purpose, and we're uniquely loved. We need to love ourselves too.
I love that, and I think that's a perfect way to end today's episode. So I appreciate your time, what you shared with us, and I look forward to connecting again with you soon.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for listening to episode number 307. Seth has definitely had his fair share of challenges throughout his life, especially during these past 10 years. However, instead of dwelling or saying the infamous words, "woe is me," Seth continues to move forward and approach life and each and every single day with a positive attitude and a growth mindset. Seth shared something I'd like to end today's episode with. To fail is your first attempt at learning. So my question to you is just that. How do you look at failure? Do you look at it as a roadblock? Or perhaps we should all instead reframe our failures as stepping stones. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.